Hi everyone, Becky here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sewing up the urban jacket from Lowland Kids, and this is a more unique pattern. It has a couple different features on it that can be a little bit tricky, and so I'm just going to walk you through all of the steps from start to finish of doing this jacket, and I hope that you find it helpful. So let's get started. First, I thought I'd just go over the pieces that you're gonna need. Since I am doing the inseam pockets, I have those cut out, and I am planning on doing the flat pocket, but I'm gonna see, the pattern recommends not doing it on smaller sizes. They say up to 12 months. They don't recommend doing it on because of the size and the size of the pocket and everything, just not working together with the inseam pockets. So I'm going to attempt to do one, and we'll just kind of see how that goes. But I am actually using 4 different fabrics for this. So for the main body, I am using this camo French terry, and then I also have a plain oatmeal French terry that matches that. For a contrasting, I'm using that for the lining of the hood, and then for the patch pocket, if done, and then I'm using a ribbed knit for the cuffs and bands, and then I'm actually using a jersey knit for the pockets, the inseam pockets, because it's just a lot thinner, and using French terry with French terry just can get a little bulky, and since I have some that matches and it goes with my rib, I just decided to use that instead. But so the first thing we're going to have is our front bodice. You're going to have 2 pieces that are opposites, and you will have 4 pieces cut along this jagged edge if you are doing the inseam pocket. The big thing with this, I will be honest, I missed it when I first did it, but my guy's a little short, so it's going to be okay. But if you are doing this inseam pocket, cutting this jagged edge, you need to make sure you add a 1/2 inch to the bottom here to account for the seam allowance. And then we have one back piece, which I'm going to need to cut off a 1/2 inch of this, like I said, because I'm going to need it to match up with my front, and it is not going to because I didn't add that extra on there. So we have our fronts and our backs, and then we have 2 sleeves, which I'm also doing in this camo. And then we have our hood main, 2 opposites, and then our hood lining, which are 2 opposites as well. Then we have 1 waistband, 2 cuffs, 2 sets of opposite inseam pockets, and then I have 1 flat pocket. You can do 2 if you would like. So if you're doing 2, you'll need 2 of these pieces. So if you're doing the inseam pockets, this is going to be your first step. We are going to take 1 set of our opposites of the front pieces and 1 pocket set, and we can set the other piece aside. And when you cut it out, there was markings, little notches on your pattern pieces and pockets to line up. And what we're just going to do is we're going to take our the straight edge over here that had your notches on it with right sides together, and we're going to line up our notches on this diagonal edge here with both pockets, and you want the point of your pocket facing down. And then we are just going to pin that on, and then we are going to sew across here from notch to notch. So you don't want to go all the way from the edge of the pocket to each edge. You want to go notch to notch because you are going to have to make little slits in it, and you do want to do this on a sewing machine with a straight stitch if you have one available. You can make it work on a serger, it's just a little hard to make sure you keep it in the notches on a serger. Once those are sewn on, you can see here where I stopped on the edges on both of those. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take some scissors, and you are just going to snip straight down right to your stitch line. You want to make sure you do not cut through your stitch line, otherwise you'll have a hole and your seams will eventually unravel. So just cut right up to it. And a tip for that is you don't want to try and cut it like this. You want to line the tip of your scissors up with your seam line. That way you don't cut through it. This is also easier if you use snips if you have them, but I don't know where mine are, so just gonna do that. All right, so then what you're gonna do is you're gonna flip your pocket open on both pieces like so, and you're gonna take your bottom and you are going to flip it over and you're going to match up your pockets and pin your pockets together. So you want to make sure, I like to line up the tops of my pockets first on that seam. Open it up and then pin it together from there. Pin all the way around your pocket, matching up those raw edges, making sure you have right sides together. And then you're going to continue to line up your edges of your fronts. And so these are you're going to have to kind of play with and twist to get lined up on these corners. You just kind of got to work with it, and that's why we had to snip those edges to get these to lay nicely. And they're not going to look pretty from this way when you're lining them up, just because of the nature of the curves, but you want to get it as good as you can. And then we're going to start over here and sew down and then go around your pocket, do your whole pocket up, and then continue over to this edge. So this is going to be all one stitch all the way around, completing this piece, so that then when we're done we'll fold this over and it will be all one piece on our front. And so then when you do these corners, you just really want to make sure you keep those edges lined up there, and just make sure it's not getting caught folded on this piece as you stitch under it. So once you have everything pinned down, you are going to start on the inside portion of your bodice, so the part that'll be in the middle front, and you are going to make sure everything is lined up, and you are going to sew across your raw edge here of your front bodice pieces, and then you're going to pivot at your corner. At your corner, you really want to be careful making sure that your pocket pieces, the seams are lined up on the front and matching over here, and then that you're catching everything in it when you pivot. So you're going to pivot around that corner, go down this side of your pocket and around this edge, and then you are going to stop down here, and then you're going to come over here and you're going to do the same thing starting on this edge. You're going to show this little short edge, pivot here, and go down your edge of your pocket and stop here. So this bottom part of your pocket will be left open when you are done. So after you sewed both of those sides, again, I said this bottom part will be left open for the time being. And then you're just going to flip your front open, and it should look like this, and you can see your pocket hole here should be nice and hidden. You shouldn't really have anything sticking out on the edges. And then the next thing I'm going to do, it's not required, but it definitely makes it look a lot nicer, is I'm going to press this down, and then I'm going to top stitch this seam along this top portion here, and then this bottom portion here. It just gives it a much cleaner finished look, and then once you do that, you will repeat all of these same steps on the other side of your front bodice. All right, so once you are done, you can see I top stitched both of them, and I have both of my pockets here, and then you can give them a nice press. And then the instructions say if you have your pocket hanging down past the edge of your bodice, you want to trim off the bottom so that it is aligned with the bottom edge of your sweatshirt. So I'm just going to do that right now. And this one's rolling, so I'm going to do it this way. You don't want it hanging down past the hem of your jacket. So you trim both of those. And then the next step would be to do the flap pocket, which I did decide I'm not going to do after putting it on here and kind of just seeing so the next step is if you are doing the patch pockets, and I did mess up at the beginning, you do need 2 of them because you sew them together. So if you're doing the patch pockets, make sure you have 2 of your pieces. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to place our pieces on top of each other, lining up all of the raw edges with right sides together. And then you are going to, with a straight stitch on your sewing machine, again, you could do this on a serger if that's all you have, but it's just not going to lay as nicely once you open it up, because you do want to be able to clip the corners and do that so you get nice crisp corners, which is not really as possible on a serger. So if you have a sewing machine, straight stitch, go all the way around, and you want to leave about a 3/4 to an inch gap on one side. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that and be back. Once you sewed your pocket, you can kind of see my stitching on there. And what you're going to do, and this is why you want to do your straight stitches along the top. First, you want to clip your corners. When you're doing all of these, you want to make sure you do not cut your stitching. If you do happen to cut through your stitches, you will need to go back and move your stitch line in just a little bit and restitch that spot to make sure that you didn't you don't have a hole. But you're just going to go along this top curve first, then, and cut out a bunch of V's along there, again making sure you don't cut your fabric so that your tip of your V you want almost on top of your seam line, as close as you can get without cutting that. So this just reduces the bulk in those seams when we flip it. So you can see here's the top of mine, and then we're also going to go down here to these corners and just trim. I like to trim the seam allowance a little bit too on these edges. And then, so your pocket should now look like this. And then you're going to find your little hole that you made, and you're going to flip your pocket out. So if you're using like a thicker fabric for this, you are probably going to need to make a little bit of a bigger hole. But you should be fine. This is French terry, and I got it through there pretty easily. Then you just want to kind of play with it and get it to lay nicely, and then you're going to want to take something and pop your corners out the best you can to make them lay nicely. And then after that, you want to give it a good press to make sure your seams are all laying nice and flat. So I'm going to go ahead and press it and be back. Alright, so you can see here I pressed it, and you can see how crisp and nice it looks. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you press your flaps of your hole that you didn't sew down in there. And then what you're going to do now is you're just going to, you can kind of eyeball it, the top third, which the top is your curve, from the top third, you're going to top stitch around the edge of your pocket. So I'm just going to start over here, go up around my curve and down to about here. So once you have top stitched your pocket, I just pressed this kind of weird, that's why it looks like that. There's a good chance that it's going to get stretched out, and so you may need to give it a nice steam to get it back in its shape. What we're going to do is we are going to take your top, and you just want to kind of pick which side you want to be the top. It doesn't really matter. It's whichever one looks better, I guess. And we're going to fold this curve down to about the halfway point. So it's about, once it's folded, about half hitting in the middle. I like it a little bit less than halfway, maybe more like a third. And I'm just going to put a pin here in this curve. Make sure my edges are equal. Then I'm going to take my bodice piece, and when you cut it out on your pattern piece, there's a marking. I don't know if you can really see, I did it in chalk, it's really faint, of where to place your pocket. So I'm going to line it up, the top edge of it along that line, and then I'm just gonna pin it into place. A lot of times I also like to use wash away hem tape. It's really nice for keeping pockets in place, and also so that they don't stretch when you are sewing them. So if that's an issue, you have wash away hem tape, or also even just washable Elmer's glue sticks works great. And so when you do this folded down, you are going to sew along this edge here of your fold. So this is really just a faux flat pocket, but yeah, so you're just going to continue pinning, and the more pins the better. Just make sure it stays in place a little bit better. And then once you're done pinning, you will go, and this isn't quite even, top stitch this pocket down. You'll leave the top part open, but you're going to stitch down along the sides and the bottom of your pocket. So once you have the pocket sewn on, it's going to look like this. I'm going to be honest, I'm just not really a huge fan of how this pocket is done. I don't know. So probably if I do this again, I probably won't do the pocket, if I'm going to be honest, but that's just my personal preference. But I just wanted to do it to try it out and to show you what it looked like. But once you have that on, you're going to take your back bodice piece, and we are going to line up or lay our back bodice out, and we're going to line up the arm side and our shoulder seam, and we're going to pin our shoulder seam here on this side, and then do the same thing. You want to line up your arm side just to make sure you have it on the right side, and then pin your shoulder seam, and then we're going to just sew along both shoulder seams. Once you've sewn these shoulder seams, it's going to look like this. And what you want to do here, if you're going to put any sort of closure, snaps, buttons, buttonholes, you are going to want to put some sort of interfacing along this edge. Now the instructions say only if it's a thinner fabric, but chances are if you're doing especially snaps, if you are using a stretch fabric and you put snaps in, at some point your snaps will rip through your fabric, and it's not really possible to fix it once there's a hole in there without putting some sort of patch on it. So save yourself the headache and interface it. If you do not have interfacing, you can use like a woven fabric. I would maybe just cut like an inch of a woven fabric, and you could just do like one basting stitch down the middle to hold it in place. Or you could use, like I said, a washable glue stick, like I said earlier, but you are going to want some sort of reinforcement if you're going to be snapping and unsnapping your jacket. So I'm going to iron this on. I just cut it. It's about 1 inch wide, the length of the front snap panel here. I got my interfacing on, and now I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is our sleeves. So I'm going to open this up with the right side facing me, and I'm going to take my sleeves here, and I'm going to just fold it in half and find the middle point of my sleeve, and then I'm going to match that middle point up with my, this way, right sides together. You're going to do it across the shirt. So line up your raw edges, the middle, and then you'll just ease it in, continuing to match up those raw edges along the arm side on the front and back. And then once you have done that, you will just go ahead and sew this sleeve on. So I'm going to go ahead and just sew along this seam and attach my sleeve, and then I'm going to also do the other sleeve while I'm at it. You want to do the exact same steps on this side with your other sleeve. Once you have your sleeve sewn on, it's going to look a little something like this once it's all open. And what we're going to do is we're just going to fold this back down, lining up our right sides together. We're going to line up this underarm seam in our arm side, and then from there we are just going to work our way down the side of the bodice, matching up your side seams. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I did not cut the front longer to account for the inseam pocket, which is why mine is a little bit shorter. But otherwise, if you did do that correctly, or you didn't do the inseam pocket, this should line up down here at the bottom. But I'm going to just be trimming off the extra on the back to account for my mistake. And then I'm just going to come up here, do the same thing along the sleeve, match up those raw edges down to your wrist, and then your wrist seams should match up as well. And then we're just going to go and we're going to sew up here, pivot at the armpit, and all the way down to the wrist, and then you will repeat the same steps on this side of your jacket. Right, so once you have done that, you should now have what resembles a jacket. You should have everything, sleeves done, and this in theory could be put on and worn. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the wrist cuffs. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take your cuff piece and we're going to fold it in half, hamburger style, matching your right sides together, and we're going to sew along this edge here. Now I have already done that on the other cuff just to speed things up, and so we can move on to the next portion of this. You can see here where I sewed that up. What you're going to do is you're going to take it along the seams, and I like to just match up my seams and then fold it over. And while I'm here, I'm going to use my seams as one point, and then oops. So when you fold your cuff, you're going to have it wrong sides together so that it's the right side on both sides. And then I'm going to find the other center point on this side. Then you're going to come over to your sleeve, and you're going to find, you want to match your seams up. So I'm going to find my seam here and then my seam at my wrist, and I am going to slip my cuff in here and match up my seams. I'm going to take this clip off, and then you just want to nest your seam allowances, which if you aren't familiar, the seam allowances on my cuff are folded in this way, and then I fold the sleeve seam allowance this way, so then I have seam allowance over here and seam allowance over here, and that just reduces bulk a little bit at that seam. But then I'm going to come and I'm going to hold on to where my pin is and find that center point of my wrist, and then bring that to this pin and just slide it in there. And then as you can see, the cuff is quite a bit smaller, so you're going to just want to stretch it evenly. You can pin it in fourths if you want on these smaller sizes. There's not really enough room to do that, so I just like to just stretch it as I stitch, and you're going to stitch that on, and then you'll repeat all of those steps on this cuff, sewing it to the opposite wrist. Once you have your cuff sewn on, it's going to look like this, and you can fold it out, and then you can flip your sleeve right side out and just see how that looks. And it's going to gather this wrist up just slightly because the sleeve is smaller, or the sleeve is larger than the cuff. But so now we're just going to set that aside. Once you have done both arms, we're going to set our jacket aside, and we're going to get our hood pieces. So this is my main body, the print, and then I have my lining. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lay them both on top of each other with the same prints matching each other. So my lining pieces right sides together on top of each other, and then my main pieces right sides on top of each other. And these already are good to go on this one because of how I cut it. And we're just going to line those up, and then you can pin along your raw edge here along this top curve only on both pieces. We're going to just start here and sew around the curve and stop, and then do the same exact thing on our lining piece. So once you sewed the hood pieces, they should look something like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to take our jacket now, and I'm going to work with my main piece first here. I'm going to open up my jacket with the right side facing me, and I'm going to find the center point of my neckline, and with right sides together here, I'm going to match up that seam and pin it into place. And then I'm just going to continue pinning my hood all the way around, and it's not going to match up to the edge here. You should have about 1 inch left over because that's going to get folded over on top of it. So you want 1 inch on both sides of the end of your hood. So you're just going to finish pinning this around. Should have it pinned on all the way like that. So again, making sure it's right sides together, your main fabric on here. And we're going to flip it over to the wrong side of your fabric, and we are going to take our lining of our hood now. We're going to find the bottom of our hood here, and we are going to put the right side of our hood onto the wrong side of the fabric. So our seams of our lining should be out facing us, as well as the seams of the jacket. So what we're going to do now is this was my middle pin for the outer main hood, and I'm going to add this one into that pin, and then again, just like we did before, I'm going to continue pinning this in. I'm just going to add it to the other pins, and our lining is going to be shorter than our main hood. So this one is going to have a little bit more room. And then we are just going to take our fabric, or take all of this over to our machine, and we are going to sew starting at the edge of our lining, so that 1 inch in, and then we're going to sew all the way across. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my main hood, and on the right side of my jacket I'm going to find the middle point of my neckline. I'm going to match up this center seam. I'm going to make sure you're using the bottom edge of the hood. You can very easily accidentally use the wrong end and get it all mixed up, but so double check that, and then you're just going to then continue on both sides of that center point, easing your hood in along the neckline, matching up the raw edges, and we're going to match it up with the edge over here as well. Then you just do that on the other side of the hood. If you want, you could start here, line up that edge seam there, and then just ease this in the rest of the way. So again, right sides together for the main hood. And now we're going to take it and flip it to the wrong side of the jacket. We're going to leave the hood down where we can't see it, and we are just going to take our hood lining now, and with the right side of our hood we are going to line it up with this center seam again on our neckline, adding it into the pin with the outer main piece of our hood. And so again, this is right sides. Again, make sure you're using the correct side of your hood on this piece here, and then just make sure you have your right side touching the wrong side of your jacket. And then we're just going to ease this in along the way with the rest of the pins, and the only difference here is our lining is shorter than our main piece, so you should have 1 inch on each end for your lining that does not match up to the edge of your jacket. And then what you're going to do once you have that pinned, so you should have 3 layers here. Your jacket is sandwiched in between your main hood and your hood lining. And what you're going to do is you're just going to take this over to your machine, making sure you catch all 3 layers. You're going to start at one edge and sew all the way across down to this end. Once you have sewn this hood section, you should have, again, like I said, all 3 layers sandwiched in there, hood on each side of your jacket. We're going to set that aside for just a second. We're going to take out our waistband and we're going to fold it. This is really long, so I'll just do one side, fold it with right sides together. We're going to fold it long ways, matching up our short edges here, and we're going to do that on both sides, and then we're just going to stitch up these short edges. So we're going to start here and sew up this side and then do the same on that side, and I will be back. Once you have sewn the edges of your waistband, it's going to look something like this, and you're just going to kind of trim those strings if you have extra, and then we're just going to flip it out and kind of pop out the corners the best you can on both pieces, and then just kind of stretch it to roughly line up that edge there. And then we're going to take our jacket and lay it out on the top here, and I'm just going to work on one side at a time. We are going to take our waistband and fold it up so our raw edges are together, and again we're going to do that 1 inch mark. I'm going to line up the edge of my waistband there, so you should have 1 inch of no waistband. And then what you're going to do before you pin it in place is you're going to take your waist or your jacket bodice and you're going to fold it over so that it hugs your waistband nice and tight. And I like to pin up here to hold that in place, and then down here as well. And then we're going to come over to the other side, making sure you're not twisting your waistband. You want to make sure that it stays nice and flat and even. We're going to do the exact same thing over here. So again, 1 inch, fold over, and again, you want to make sure it's hugging it real tight there, not too tight that it's folding your waistband over, but tight enough that then when you sew that in place, it doesn't leave a gap. And then your next thing is you're just going to ease this waistband in. And so I like to just kind of, since I have my edges lined up, I'm going to find the middle of my waistband and put a marker on it. And then I'm going to find the middle of my jacket, just like we did with the cuffs, and pin those together, matching up those raw edges. And then just, it's a little bit smaller than your waistband, or than the waist of your jacket. So you want to account for that. And the other thing is you're going to sew this pocket down into the waistband. So you want to make sure that on these edges, you line up the raw edges and you get that lined up with your waistband so that it closes off the bottom of your pocket. And then you'll just do the same thing on the other side. Ease that in and then match up your pockets there. And then we're just going to sew all the way along our waistband, stretching it slightly as we sew it into place, making sure you catch both layers of your waistband the entire time, your jacket the entire time, and then your pocket when needed. So I'm just going to go ahead and start down here and sew across and end down there. Once you sewed your waistband on, it's going to look just like that. And then we're just going to take these corners and where we had this folded over, and we're going to fold them out. Now we have a nice clean edge right here on this corner. And again, this was 1 inch. I'm going to fold that out, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to press this in 1 inch all the way around and sew it down. You're just going to fold this over 1 inch, and you can press it into place if you want first. The other thing I would recommend, this is not in the instructions, I wish it was, but I would finish the raw edge on this piece so that then when you fold it over, it looks a little bit nicer to have a finished edge than just a raw edge here, especially if you're using some sort of fabric or something that's going to roll. But for the sake of this, it's not in the instructions, so I'm just going to do it as the instructions state. And so then the lining was about 1 inch shorter, so you should be able to just scoot that in and line up your edge of your main hood to your lining hood, and fold it over and down all the way around. And you're just going to do this all the way down to the other side. And then this will enclose those seams. And line this up here. And this will also be what creates your button placket. So once you have this pinned in place, you're just going to go ahead and you're going to top stitch this all the way around from one side of your waistband up the side around your hood, and then all the way down to your other side. So once you have top stitched this down, you can just see how nice this looks on the outside here, and all the way around in your hood there. And so like I said, if you wanted to, you could top stitch it or finish the raw edge before you sewed it up. Like here I have a little bit extra, so I'm just going to trim it off. But other than that, all you have to do, if you choose to add buttonholes or snaps or whatever closure you want, I will be adding some snaps onto here, and then you are done. All right, as I said, once you get everything sewn up, all you have left is adding your closures of your choice. Again, I'm going to be doing snaps, and I just haven't done that yet. Snaps, buttonholes, or whatever else. You could even leave it without it and just leave it like an open front jacket. But this is super cute. It's really unique. I love the kind of zigzagged pocket feature on the front. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's relatively simple, but it does have some unique features like the pocket and this patch pocket on it. But I hope that you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, you can leave me a comment, or you can find me on Instagram at Sobex and reach out, and I would be happy to help with anything that you have questions on. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Bye!